dear students, myself Gangadhar Solanke, and I welcome you all to the MCGM's virtual classroom.
Hello my dear students, today we are going to start with the second part of the topic post-World War political developments, which is from the political science. And in the first part of this topic, we discussed about the concept of interdependence, international relations through foreign policy, First World War, countries involved in the First World War, then also we discussed about the Second World War and the countries involved in the Second World War. Now in the second part of this topic, we are going to discuss about the concept of Cold War, effects of the Cold War, end of the Cold War and the post-Cold War or the post-Cold War world, and the last point from this topic, globalization. So here we'll today start with the concept of Cold War, which exactly means that the condition where there is no actual war, but there are such tensions in the circumstances that they may be responsible to cause war, and such condition is called as the Cold War. जहाँ पर एक्चुअल वॉर नहीं हो रहा है, आपस में देश एक दूसरे के साथ नहीं लड़ रहे, बट देयर इज टेंशन बिटवीन द कंट्रीज कि वॉर कभी भी हो सकता है. ऐसी जो सिचुएशन होती है, दैट सिचुएशन इज कॉल्ड कोल्ड वॉर. And if we go through our textbook, then it is given in our textbook that the America and the Soviet Union, who were allies in the Second World War, became competitors as soon as the war got over. So if we talk about the Second World War, America and Soviet Union were friends, वो एक दूसरे के साथ थे, but after the Second World War, they became competitors, and because of that, the cooperation between them gave way to rivalry, and this rivalry occupied a period of 40 to 45 years of international politics, and there was no open war. Open war nahi tha, but these two countries in such a tension that their relations, that it seemed that a war would erupt any time. So the concept of Cold War is used to describe the condition where there is no actual war. Actual war तो नहीं हो रहा है, but there are such tensions in the circumstances that they may be responsible to cause war. So in this period, America was already a superpower, but if we talk about the Soviet Union, which also tried to become a superpower by making nuclear weapons and by increasing its military might. So the struggle for power, basically the reason behind the war, struggle for power, arms race, differences in ideologies, attitude of checkmating each other by strategies and counter strategies gave rise to the Cold War. Now what happened because of this Cold War, that we are going to see in the next point, that is the effects of the Cold War. And in this, the first point, creation of military organizations, then the bipolarization of the world, arms race, creation of regional organizations, non-alignment, non-aligned movement. All these were the effects of the Cold War, and now in detail we'll talk about this one by one. So the first one, creation of military organizations. During the Cold War, both the superpowers created military organizations, Soviet Union and America. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty, was a military organization under the dominance of America. because the respective superpowers took up the responsibility of the security of the countries joining the military organizations led by them. So, Warsaw Pact was a military of the Soviet Union. So military organizations create हो गए because of this situation. Then bipolarization of the world. During the Cold War, most countries of the world joined either of the two superpower blocks. अपने आप को सेफ रखने के लिए उनको या तो इस पार्टी में जाना पड़ा या फिर इस पार्टी में बजाना पड़ा. जो भी दोनों सुपर पावर थे, छोटे छोटे जो देश थे, उन्होंने किसी भी एक ग्रुप में जाना पसंद किया. Now because of this, such a division of the nations of the world in two groups is bipolarization, and the scope of the Cold War increased. The sphere of tension also spread throughout the world. Then the next, arms race, which was very dangerous for the world. The superpowers started producing arms on large scale. Why? क्योंकि उन्हें डर था कि कभी भी अगर वॉर होता है तो अगर उससे बचना है तो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा आर्म्स प्रोड्यूस करने पड़ेंगे. एंड दैट्स वाई दे स्टार्टेड डूइंग इट. दे स्टार्टेड rivalry to make more and more destructive weapons and to acquire the technology required for the same. But soon, both the superpowers realized that the arms race may endanger international peace, and that's why efforts towards arms control and disarmament also happened during this period. Then the creation of regional organizations. This was also the reason developing nations created regional organizations at the regional level in order to ensure mutual cooperation in the context of the superpower rivalry. अगर ये दो सुपर पावर से बचना है तो एक रीजनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस बनना स्टार्ट हुआ, क्योंकि कभी अगर समय आया तो उनसे हमें बचना पड़ेगा, या फिर एक म्यूचुअल कोऑपरेशन अंडरस्टैंडिंग होनी चाहिए, विच वाज द पार्ट ऑफ फॉरेन पॉलिसी. देन इन दैट they felt that economic development was more important, and that's why European countries came together and formed the European Economic Community. And while the South East Asian countries, that is Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, established the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that is ASEAN. So it was started there, formation or creation of regional organizations. And the next step of that, non-alignment. In the period of the Cold War, while the world was becoming bipolar, there were some countries which did not want to join the superpower. Now try to understand this in detail. दो सुपर पावर थी, बाकी देशों को लगा कि अगर हमें सेफ रहना है तो किसी न किसी एक देश के साथ, एक सुपर पावर के साथ जुड़ना अच्छा है. ये एक बात हो गई. देन द सेकंड थिंग, कुछ कंट्रीज ऐसे थे जिनको लगा कि इससे अच्छा है कि हम हमारा इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट करें. फिर उन्होंने रीजनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस बनाए. और एक तीसरे कंट्रीज थे जिन्हें ऐसा लगा कि हमें इन दोनों के साथ भी नहीं जाना चाहिए, हमें अपने देश की डेवलपमेंट के बारे में सोचना चाहिए. एंड दैट इज़ वॉट, there were some countries which did not want to join the superpower, and their policy is known as non-alignment. In non-alignment was an important movement during the Cold War. So if we talk in detail about the non-alignment movement, then in that the Asian and the African countries which became independent after the Second World War supported the idea of non-alignment. This movement started from 1961 under the leadership of India's Prime Minister पंडित जवाहरलाल नेहरू, प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ यूगोस्लाविया मार्शल टीटो, प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इजिप्ट गमाल अब्दल नासिर, President of Indonesia Dr. Sukarno, and Prime Minister of Ghana Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Here you can see. And the 5 principles of non-alignment: mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, mutual non-aggression, mutual non-interference in domestic affairs, equality and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. So the basic idea of non-aligned movement was together we can grow. The non-aligned movement has opposed colonialism, imperialism and racism. It has encouraged the resolution of international disputes by peaceful means, in which सबका भला था जिसमें India led this movement under the guidance of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and India continued to actively support the movement afterwards as well. Even after the end of the Cold War, the importance of the movement has not reduced. The non-aligned movement is based on eternal principles of humanism, global peace and equality. It has inspired the less developed countries to come together. And if we summarize this, then the significance of the non-aligned movement has not reduced even if the Cold War is over. It inspired the less developed countries to come together. It brought several new streams of economic and social changes into international politics. It gave these countries the confidence to assert themselves with self-respect in international politics. So the basic thing which was given by the non-alignment to the small countries, that the self confidence. ज़रूरी नहीं है कि किसी एक सुपर पावर के साथ जाना चाहिए, हम अकेले रहकर भी अपनी डेवलपमेंट कर सकते हैं by the mutual cooperation of neighboring countries. Then in this, the next point, end of the Cold War. The Cold War that had dominated international politics since 1945 came to an end. It was an important event that happened towards the end of the last century. So in this, the Soviet Union adopted the policy of opening up the economy. The state loosened up its control of the economy. Then the president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, implemented the policies of restructuring and openness. Due to these policies, the control over the media reduced. Important changes took place in political and economic sphere. That is, these spheres were restructured and this gave impetus to democracy. As the East European countries under the influence of the Soviet Union adopted the capitalist and democratic paths, there changed. And the last one, the Soviet Union disintegrated and several new nations were created out of it after the end of Cold War. सोवियत यूनियन अलग अलग होके उसमें से बहुत सारे छोटे छोटे देश बने एंड रशिया was the biggest country in the Soviet Union. So these were the reasons for the end of the Cold War. Now the point after end of the Cold War is post Cold War world. Cold War के बाद का वर्ल्ड कैसा था? The Cold War came to an end with the disintegration of the Soviet Union, which till then had been a superpower, and because of this major changes took place in world. For example, America remained the only superpower in world politics. जो दो थे अमेरिका और सोवियत यूनियन, लेकिन सोवियत यूनियन के टुकड़े हुए, उसमें से बहुत सारे देश बने, रशिया उसमें से एक सबसे बड़ा देश रहा। लेकिन कोल्ड वॉर के बाद की सिचुएशंस की अगर बात करेंगे तो अमेरिका एक ही सुपर पावर पूरी दुनिया में रह गई। A conducive atmosphere prevailed for the growth in trade and economic relations between and among nations. So capital, labor, market and information circulated throughout the world. Ideas spread freely as well. Then, as all nations of the world gave priority to trade relations, the idea of giving aid to other nations fell behind, and instead efforts began to be made to establish economic relations. Economical growth or economical development was at the center. So the description of a country which was opposed to another has now changed from enemy nation to rival nation. Environmental protection, fostering of human rights, gender equality and management of natural calamities now acquired a global dimension, and the responsibility here you can see responsibility of the United Nations has increased. So this was the world after post Cold War. Cold War के बाद this was the situation in the world. Now the next concept in this is of globalization, and the question is given, what is globalization? Because this word now we are using in our day-to-day study or in research field, globalization. So after the end of the Cold War, trade and economic relations between countries became more open. जैसे आज today by sitting here at the place we can chat or talk with any person anywhere in the world. So globalization is the new buzzword that has come to dominate the world since the 90s of the last century, with the end of the Cold War and the breakup of the former Soviet Union. The term implies worldly integration, amalgamation of various cultures, styles, economic policies and ideas. Today we use a word like world become a global village. जैसे आज इंडिया में हुई चीज़ कहीं और उसका इफेक्ट होता है, उधर की किसी और चीज़ का इधर इफेक्ट होता है, और कल्चर्स जो है वो मिक्सअप मोस्टली हो गया है. It must not be confused with making things common around the world. It is an integration, not stimulation. So if we talk about globalization in detail, the give and take of ideas among people all over the world grew. And due to the revolution in information technology, different events and developments begin to be known everywhere. जैसे स्पोर्ट्स इवेंट्स है किसी और देश में चल रहे होते हैं, एंड वी कैन वॉच इट लाइव हियर बाय सिटिंग इन आवर होम. द बाउंड्रीज बिटवीन नेशंस डिड नॉट रिमेन एज कंट्रोल्ड as they were before, and all these processes are together called globalization. So in globalization, growth, science, technology, communication, environment, culture and wealth, all these things are very important. So just as globalization has brought us benefits, it has also caused losses. For example, if we talk, as the economies of different countries got linked with each other, trade increased, economic unification grew, plenty of products became available in the markets, but the gap between the poor and the rich nations did not reduce because of the concept of globalization also. So in short, globalization is what? The increasing importance of international operations for people, countries and governments. It leads to increasing interdependence between countries across the world, shared needs to exchange goods and services. बहुत सारी चीज़ें इंपोर्ट होती है, एक्सपोर्ट होती है, एंड एट द सेम टाइम सर्विसेज ऑल्सो कैन import and export. Countries are becoming even more connected by increasing trade and international investment, the development of transport links, the development of global communications and information technology, and also global tourism. And now today, if we talk, social media also changed the concept of globalization totally. So in this chapter, what we studied, the global developments from 1945 onwards. We understood the world in the Cold War period, the arms race and the efforts at disarmament. We also learned about the meaning of globalization. Please subscribe the channel and press bell icon to get notifications.
So my dear ones, this is all for today. Thank you very much. Stay home, stay safe, take care.